I was standing at the sink in the men's room of a steakhouse in downtown Scottsdale, letting the cold water run over my wrists. Alyssa was sitting at our table out in the main dining room, waiting for me to come back so we could order. It was our anniversary. Everything about the evening was supposed to be sharp, connected, and present. But as I gripped the edges of the marble counter and looked at myself in the mirror, I felt completely hollowed out. I was physically there, but the machinery inside felt sluggish, heavy, and totally unresponsive. I was carrying this quiet dread about how the rest of the night was going to go, knowing that my body was not in a state of readiness. Instead of dealing with the mechanical reality of what was happening, I did what I had spent 30 years doing in corporate sales. I put on the mask, I straightened my collar, took a shallow breath, and walked back to the table, determined to project an energy I absolutely did not feel in my own body. The engine was idling rough, the fuel lines felt constricted, and I was just praying she wouldn't notice the check engine light flashing on the dashboard. I spent the entire dinner in my own head, completely disconnected from the woman sitting across from me. Look, I know how many men are walking out of bathrooms, getting back into bed, or sitting down at dinner tables, pretending everything is fine when their physical machinery feels like it has shut down for the night. Losing that edge of physical readiness when you want to be present with your partner is an incredibly isolating experience, and the medical industry does not know how to talk to us about it without making us feel like patients. We are going to talk about exactly what is clamping down inside your body when you feel that heavy disconnection, and I am going to show you the mechanical reset I had to learn so you can walk back into the room with actual physical confidence. The standard protocol when you tell a doctor that you feel sluggish, slow, or disconnected down there is to immediately pull out the prescription pad. The clinical world looks at men over 50 and assumes that our systems are just failing by default. They want to put you on hormone replacement therapies, daily prostate medications, or synthetic performance pills. They treat a mechanical issue like a disease. But when I finally started looking at the actual infrastructure of the male body, I realized that taking a prescription pill for this specific problem is like pouring high-octane racing fuel into an engine that has a massive kink in the main fuel line. It does not matter what you put in the tank if the plumbing is clamped shut. What was actually happening to me that night in the restaurant, and what happens to most of us, is a severe mechanical lock in the pelvic floor and the area surrounding the prostate. We spend decades of our lives sitting in office chairs, driving in traffic, and carrying low-grade tension in our lower bodies. That entire hammock of muscle at the base of your anatomy physically tightens up over the years. It clamps down like an industrial vice. When that vice tightens, it literally chokes off the microcirculation that feeds the prostate and the reproductive organs. It restricts the physical space needed for blood to flow, and it sends a constant low-level stress signal to the brain that physically suppresses your natural testosterone production. Your body thinks it is under physical attack, so it shuts down the systems required for intimacy. I knew I had to figure out how to manually release that vice. And the first change I made is a mechanical reset that I now do every single time I need the system to wake up. It is a 60-second physical adjustment I do in the bathroom right before I walk back into the room with Alyssa. I stand facing the mirror, place both hands firmly on the counter to stabilize my upper body, and I slightly bend my knees. Then, instead of breathing into my chest, I take a massive, slow breath deep into my stomach, and I intentionally push that pressure down into the pelvic floor. It is the exact opposite of holding your breath or pulling your stomach in. You are mechanically forcing the muscles around the prostate to expand and drop. I hold that downward pressure for 5 seconds, release, and repeat it 10 times. The change in the body is immediate. By manually forcing that vice to open, you instantly unkink the hose. You feel a sudden rush of warmth and circulation returning to the lower half of your body. The nervous system registers the release of tension and immediately drops out of defense mode. You stop faking the confidence because the physical readiness is actually back online. The second adjustment had to do with how I was treating the fluid dynamics in that same area throughout the day. When the prostate is compressed and irritated from sitting, it retains inflammatory fluid, which is exactly why so many men over 50 feel a constant, heavy pressure down there or have to wake up 4 times a night. I realized I was drinking coffee all morning and barely touching water until dinner. I was running the engine completely dry and expecting the pipes to clear themselves out. I changed the protocol. I started front-loading my hydration, drinking a massive amount of water in the first 4 hours of the day, and then tapering off completely by the early evening. By flushing the system heavily when the body is active, you force the kidneys and the lower tract to push the stagnant, inflammatory fluid out of the pelvic region. The heavy, sluggish feeling in the lower abdomen disappeared, and more importantly, I finally started sleeping through the night without the system waking me up to relieve phantom pressure. If it makes sense to you that we need to start looking at our bodies like mechanics instead of patients, take a second to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. There are thousands of men out there right now being handed unnecessary prescriptions because nobody told them how their own plumbing actually works. Your interaction with this video helps push this information to the men who need to hear it most. The third change was about changing the baseline tension during my workday. The 60-second reset in the bathroom works perfectly to open the lines in the moment, but I needed to stop clamping the vise shut for 8 hours a day. I realized that the way I was sitting at my desk was putting the entire weight of my upper body directly onto the perineum and the prostate. I was physically crushing the infrastructure. I changed my seating mechanics completely. I started sitting with my weight rolled back onto my glutes and my lower back supported, keeping the pressure completely off the center line of the pelvic floor. It sounds like a minor detail, but when you remove 80 pounds of direct mechanical pressure from your most sensitive vascular pathways for 40 hours a week, the body responds. The baseline circulation stays open and the engine stays warm and ready instead of going cold and dormant. But I also have to be completely honest about the limits of just changing the physical mechanics. The breathing, the hydration, and the postural shifts changed the game for me, but the years of restriction had still left my hormonal baseline in a compromised state. The hardware was functioning better, but the chemical environment was still off. I refused to go the synthetic route, so I went looking for what actually supports the prostate and the hormonal balance naturally. I eventually found a natural formula that I added to my morning routine, and it locked the whole system into place. It contains saw palmetto, which specifically blocks the conversion of your testosterone into DHT. It preserves what your body is actually producing instead of letting it turn into something that enlarges and irritates the prostate. It also contains fenugreek, which blocks the specific enzyme that converts your testosterone into estrogen. That is a chemical imbalance that happens to way more men over 50 than anyone wants to admit, and it completely kills your drive. Once I started supporting the internal chemistry alongside the mechanical changes, the consistency of my physical response returned to a level I honestly thought I had left in my 40s. I put a QR code right here on the screen, and I also linked the exact formulation I used down in the pinned comment below the video. If you are tired of the medical establishment pushing pills on you, take a look at it and see if it fits your own maintenance plan. What we are really talking about is taking ownership of your own physical reality. The clinical world is not necessarily malicious, but they are operating on a model of disease and symptom management. They do not have the time or the structure to teach you how to maintain the daily mechanics of your own body. When you let the system decline, you slowly become a spectator in your own life. You start avoiding intimacy, you stop initiating, and you let a quiet, unspoken distance grow between you and your wife. You do not have to accept that distance as a permanent condition of getting older. You can unkink the lines, release the tension, and get the engine running properly again. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been handed a prescription for a men's issue when you felt like you really just needed to fix your physical routine? Drop your experience down there so other men can read it. The cost of ignoring this is watching the physical connection in your marriage slowly fade out over the next 10 years because you were too proud to look under the hood. The breathing reset, the mechanical shifts, and the natural support I use are just the tools I found to keep the infrastructure solid. Scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the pinned comment below. Look at the compounds, understand how they protect the system, and make a decision to take control of your own machinery. Many men aren't broken. They are just ignoring the wrong things.